With 2 kids in tow, they placed an order for just 1 kid's meal. There was a problem, as the waitress realized: a waiter. When a family with 2 kids placed an order at the restaurant for only 1 kid's lunch, Judith became quite concerned. Welcome to USA Stories channel. Do not forget to subscribe and activate the bell button to receive all new updates. Now let's go to the story. She made the decision to keep an eye on them and saw that the little child was going without food and receiving no conversation from the other family members. "Do you need help?" she said, holding out a sign. She received the necessary confirmation quite promptly. Having at last been able to speak with the young child, Judith was prepared to act. Therefore, as the family stood and took the young child by the hand, as they were leaving the restaurant, Judith was more than happy to obstruct them by asking pointed questions. The family was about to leave when Judith and a few other dinner attendees confronted them with what they had seen. After turning as red as a cherry, the father turned to face his daughter. "This is not what it looks like," the father blurted out. Judith could hardly believe he was done. But why had the father said that? Was there something else going on? Or was there something wrong with the small girl? Judith had enough experience working in the same restaurant to know that she could rely on her instincts when it came to patrons. She sensed something off when a young family entered that afternoon. She didn't have time to examine them closely to determine what was upsetting her, and nothing about them was plainly wrong. The restaurant was full of patrons because it was Saturday night's supper rush. Judith arrived with beverages in hand, checked that the family was situated at their table, and raced over to collect orders from the other guests. Although the family appeared kind, she couldn't get rid of the sense that something was lacking. Judith went past the family several times on her way back and forth, then came back to take their order for supper. Considering they had 2 little children at the table, the only thing she noticed about them was that they were quieter than the other visitors. That appeared to be beneficial, in fact. Perhaps they would make a simple table. Or perhaps not. Judith, a professional waitress, was aware that even well-behaved children sometimes exhibit sudden mood swings. When kids weren't yelling or rushing around, she felt thankful. She was almost sorry that she had misjudged the family when they had first come. However, Judith's relief turned to dismay as soon as the family began to finish their order. Judith discovered that the family had placed only 3 supper orders after they were all done. That didn't add up because there were 2 parents and 2 kids. Not even a side dish to pair with the entrees, nor a second meal from the kids' menu was served. And Judith's mind went into overdrive. What was happening? Concerned about the second kid was Judith. Even an adult may have been satisfied by their entree, but they weren't very large to split. Furthermore, even if the youngster had dietary restrictions, at the very least, the parents ought to have placed a modest order. Judith observed the kids to look for any indications of a problem. Nothing unusual seemed to be happening. The children seemed well-mannered and kind. However, Judith had witnessed parents deprive their kids of food as a form of discipline after spending years visiting various households. However, there was a significant distinction between providing a disobedient child with no food at all and refusing to purchase them food in a restaurant. She made the decision to investigate the situation. Judith requested one of her co-workers to take over the table for her in the interim. When the family didn't believe she was looking, she wanted to be able to check in with them. Even though Judith would have to divide her gratuity, it seemed worthwhile to find out whether the kids were okay. All she had to do was wait for their order to be prepared. Judith experimented with many approaches and discovered the most effective techniques to monitor the family without drawing their attention. She might linger at the bar's edge or stand at the waitress station in the rear. Both locations appeared organic. Judith was able to make some inferences about the family after watching them for a short while. All of the adults at the table were chatting and acting lively, with the exception of the little child. The girl sat quietly while the parents and their son engaged in conversation. She remained completely silent as the others giggled or shared a tale. Although Judith was aware that some kids may become accustomed to toxic households, she didn't see any indications that the small youngster was unhappy about the circumstances. The little child pretended to stand up from the table at one point. The youngster may have been attempting to get aid if she was in danger, or perhaps she just wanted to use the restroom. Her father however, grabbed hold of her hand and prevented her from moving as soon as she did. Judith was about to step in when she saw that the family had finished their meal. Judith went to the table and got the food for the family. She presented the adults with the full-size entree before presenting the kids' dinner. Gathering all the bravery she possessed, Judith determined she had to speak up. She was unable to ignore the situation. Judith claimed to be perplexed about the missing dinner since she was certain that the family hadn't observed her observing them. She approached the little girl to offer her an opportunity to reach out if she so desired, and she inquired as to which youngster had placed the order for the dinner. Judith was not shocked at all when the parents replied. The father said that the food was for his kid, without thinking twice. The boy appeared happy that his dinner was ready, while the other kids showed no reaction at all. Judith, who was still bewildered, inquired as to whether the second child's supper had disappeared and offered to check with the kitchen to see if it had been inadvertently overlooked. When the family heard Judith's query, they all appeared to freeze. With a glance that the waitress couldn't quite interpret, the girl showed a special interest in what Judith was asking. With considerable trepidation, the girl's father replied that his daughter wasn't hungry. Judith was uncertain about whom to trust. Judith saw right away that the parents were not behaving the same way toward her. They had finished responding to her queries based on their body language. She didn't want to annoy customers and had other tables to tend to, even though she wanted to keep asking. She wasn't prepared to quit up just yet, though. There wasn't much time left for Judith to discover the little girl's condition. She wanted so much to assist, but while the girl was silent, there wasn't much she could do. But Judith was determined to do whatever it took to get that child the assistance she needed. But with the parents present, how could she possibly do anything? Between bringing dishes to other tables, Judith continued to observe the family. The young daughter didn't touch anything while the son, parents, and other family members were all eating. Not one of them volunteered to give her a piece of their food or to share. Judith's heart fell at the girl's depressing appearance. It was necessary for someone to act. As Judith feigned not to notice the family, she began formulating several schemes in her mind. There had to be a method to talk to the young child that her parents wouldn't discover. When the girl's father refused to let her go, Judith considered attempting to move her away from the table, but it didn't seem feasible. But at last, Judith got an idea. Judith was instantly appreciative of her extensive knowledge of the eatery. After working there for a long time, she had learned by heart where she might stand to observe which tables. She believed she could signal to the girl in one location without the other family members seeing. Judith rushed to verify her hypothesis. When Judith arrived at the spot she had in mind, the parents were looking the other way and a pillar was in her way, preventing her from seeing the boy. From there, Judith figured she could text the girl to see whether she was safe. But the scheme was more than a little dangerous. When Judith initially chose to wave at the girl, she did not reciprocate. She seems a little perplexed by what was happening. Judith truly needed to have a private conversation with the girl before the family left the eatery. Judith sensed something wasn't quite right. Then she picked up a pen and paper and penned a note. "Do you need help?" it asked. Without her father seeing, the girl nodded as she gazed at Judith. "Okay," Judith wrote to let the girl know she would assist her. Judith now had to devise a strategy to approach the girl by herself. Speaking with her in the restroom would be the most convenient method for Judith. There was nowhere else she could talk to the child without someone else getting in the way. Judith had an idea, but she needed some of her co-workers to support her. Judith let her closest co-workers know that there was a problem in the family. In fact, one of them admitted that she had also noticed it. Judith devised a scheme to allow her co-worker to inadvertently splash soda over the girl and father. They needed to leave the table for this to happen. Judith had to first alert her manager in order to avoid losing her job for assisting a female. The proposal was really approved by her employer. They had to assist the girl. Even in cases where the actions have a valid explanation, they believed that learning the entire tale was their obligation. Thus, they initiated the plan. Even though Judith was rather anxious, she believed they were making the correct decision. Her colleague hurried up to the table and took the drink order. To ensure that the strategy would work, they prepared the order right away. Then things got going. The beverages were artfully spilled. The father lost his temper. The father became quite irate at Judith's associate. Judith hurried over to the table to assist her employer. The father stood up and made his way to the bathroom. It was Judith's moment. She had to accept it immediately. She suggested escorting the young person. Judith was staring at her mother. At first, the mother was hesitant, but her daughter pleaded with her to accompany Judith. Although she agreed, her mother felt that this was a little strange. The mother was scanning the area to see whether her husband had returned yet, but he was nowhere to be seen. This seemed unusual to Judith, but it was about to grow much stranger. Judith was seized by the arm by the mother. She drew Judith nearer. Judith was perplexed. The mother then said in a whisper, "Take her quickly." Judith was astounded by what she heard. Please remember to subscribe to our channel, give us a thumbs up, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our videos. If you enjoyed the tale, the next video that plays on your screen will probably move you too.